Well, it's about people having equitable resources,
We're
isn't it? Quite a far way away from nobody working. And how do people find purpose when it's divorced from the economic backbone of everything we have known? In the largest amount of spend per councils is adult and children's social care. Dublin, who 25% of their energy is spent on data centres, and they've got a moratorium on not building more data centres.
Welcome to the 15th episode of Behind the Algorithm. And today we're joined by the incredible Tiffany St James to unpack whether AI can help us build societies where more people live with dignity, security, and shared opportunity. In other words, how do we get to an AI utopia instead of an AI dystopia?
Thanks, Greg. Tiffany, great to have you with us. You are the first ever regional public sector chief artificial intelligence officer for Liverpool City Region. I'm glad I got that out correctly.
Almost.
Exactly. A little bit of a stumble there. But anyway, can you tell us as an audience a little bit about yourself and sort of how you got to the position you are in today, and maybe a little bit about some of the projects you're working on or some of the initiatives you're leading?
I'd be delighted to. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. So yes, I'm the first ever public sector chief AI officer. And what is really interesting about that is I get to create that blueprint. I get to, which attracted me to the role in the first place, to look at how we drive AI opportunities for our businesses and our residents within the city region. But how I got here, I spent 25 years consulting in and out of central governments, local government and global transformation projects. I did 14 years in the UK government, mainly tackling first ever technical projects. So I started DirectGov. And I was first Director of Communications for DirectGov, the precursor to gov.uk, tearing down government's web estate and putting it all on one place and one initiative. I was part of the team that launched data.gov.uk, a huge privilege to be given Sir Tim Berners-Lee as part of our project team to be able to open the UK government open data store. And I was first head of social media for any government in the world. So these kind of groundbreaking emerging tech projects. And of course, if social media was the last decade or so, we've gone through Web3, NFT, blockchain. And of course, the last couple of years, it's all been about AI. So I've been helping private sector and public sector clients understand technology as it emerges as fast as it can to make the changes that matter to them.
I was going to say, so Tim Berners-Lee, I'm a big fan of his. And so the fact that you even mentioned him as part of your project, I got to go.
We have worked. So another organisation that I'm involved with does work with the ODI.
Okay.
And the whole topic of what we're talking about today, AI utopia or dystopia, Tim Berners-Lee, I think saw the internet as a sort of utopian ideal. So I think it's really important that you mention him, and then we kick off from that point, I reckon.
Well, you just stole my line.
I didn't know you were going to get...
Tim Berners-Lee. I was thinking, we can talk about his disappointment that the internet hasn't necessarily gone to where he wants it to be. And what I like, anyway, I won't go down that path, but there's a great segue, because part of what we're talking about, or the mainstay of what we're talking about today, is what is AI utopia? And what is that vision for the future? So in terms of yourself, what do you see? What is your vision of an AI-driven utopia? What does that society look like?
Well, it's about people having equitable resources, isn't it? But it's not just enough to have good resources. If you look at that utopia, and I look at it through obviously a digital lens, but also through a government lens in terms of the way in which that I'm working. So it's not enough that people have open access to everything that they need in society. But, people also need to understand the reasons why behind things. Like if their mortgage application didn't go through, why and who made those decisions around it. And people are concerned about, who is programming perhaps AI that makes those kinds of decisions. If people don't get that job, people need to know, the rationale and, a few things that, why that happened behind that. So I think it's fair to say you paint this picture of utopia. What is the difference between an AI utopia and a utopia? Not much. But the fact is we've got AI driving a lot of the factors a lot faster at the moment in terms of that. So people having fair access to everything, but also being transparent enough to understand the decisions that are made that affect their lives, I think is really pertinent.
I'm sure you've got a follow-up question to that.
No.
Go on. I know you have.
always tell me off for coming on with too many questions. I'm going to let you have this moment.
Thank you. I think where a lot of people see AI going at the moment, there's a lot of hyperbole around the harms that it can cause. The biggest conversation at the moment is about jobs. And in an AI utopia, the ideal is no one needs to work anymore. We've got abundance of everything. You can enjoy life at your leisure. Is that how you see an AI utopia?
When people talk about an AI utopia, they're really looking at actually what does the world look like perhaps in the future.
Yeah.
They're not concerned necessarily that's a utopia or an AI utopia, but we're quite a far way away from nobody working. And there's a big debate by people more learned than myself about governments providing universal basic income or some version of that where people don't need to work anymore. It's fair to say that work will change and work will probably change dramatically over the next decade. But essentially people get used to perhaps some of those changes as it happens. And whether there's a hybrid version, people still absolutely need to find meaning. And they need to find purpose.
Purpose is the one, isn't it? Yes.
And the really interesting debate in the work environment is how do people find purpose when it's divorced from the economic backbone of everything we have known in terms of, our job, our roles. Sometimes that defines people, not everyone. So therefore, in a utopia in the future, I can't, I'm steering away from, declaring a vision, if you like, within that, because I'm not a futurist. And I think futurists are never really held to account in terms of what they might have purported. But there's a couple of avenues, isn't there, which is we may move towards a future where there is fewer work opportunities, or not necessarily opportunities, but work will change in terms of that. And we have to ensure that people still have agency, still have meaning, and still have purpose in whatever new future that's driving towards.
I love the fact you talked about futurists, because it's so easy to be right when you think the future, isn't it? Because you can also then go, I actually meant 20 years' time. I didn't really mean...
Let's not bang on about futurists. We can go down a road there.
I don't know where you're going with that one, but that's a different story. I mean, one of the things you talked about there is just about that sort of what the people are going to be like, and if we look at where we are, so that there's a big picture of what AI could be, and there's the whole Elon Musk's vision of the world. There's a whole is it Gaudat?
Yes.
And there's different contrarian views of what it could be. I think quite often one of the big challenges for people is understanding, where is it today?
Yeah.
And how do you, not where is it today, but how do you make it tangible for those people who live real lives?
Yeah.
Not those tech billionaires who are sort of, or trillionaires now, who are living in a very different world. So how do we make this tangible? What would it look like for the average sort of resident of a country, that utopia? Well, how would AI enable that utopia in the future? What do you think it would mean on their day-to-day basis for them?
Yeah, and I think, you need to bring these tangible examples. It's about, not waiting in a queue for a doctor's appointment, hanging on the phone every morning. It's actually a better system to be able to access healthcare. There being enough healthcare and people not waiting, for a variety of appointments. We have obviously I always look through things from a slightly government lens, but the largest amount of spend for councils is adult and children's social care. Well, actually, how can AI enable a world where there is more support for people who have differentiated needs? And this might be, there's a really big rise in special education needs in children. Yeah. And whether that's better diagnosis or more attention in terms of neurodiversity now than there ever has been. But how you get different kids to school.
Yes.
And the transport that enables that. Like, working out where everyone is, what their needs are, what are the different ways of being able to get them there, I think is really pertinent. So how does it feel differently for someone? They've got the access to the resources they need. And what I mean tangibly in terms of resources is they can manage their lives in a much smoother way.
Yes. I mean, I didn't realize in terms of, the more I understand, the more I get into it, the whole social care and the actual burden it places on local governments and all sorts of forms of government is quite amazing. And also when we talk about children as well, how do we, as you alluded to, how do we use AI to help them achieve their best?
Yeah.
It is a big question.
Yeah, but also for small businesses as well. There's a small business owner who's not drowning in admin, or we talk about work changing, and it will change. Not perhaps there's not going to be a flicked switch, is there, where work stops, right? It will change. But, we've got the opportunity with the resources that we have to be able to help small businesses have, a global opportunity and a scalable opportunity now. So, I mean, I look at it from a government lens, but it affects residents and businesses and, people in society, of course.
I can see how passionate you are about it. So you're absolutely in the right role at the moment to help define how AI should be used by Liverpool Combined Authority, and then hopefully set the benchmark for the rest of the UK. You'll be a trailblazer in how AI is being adopted in a citywide environment that can then be supplanted across other cities, which is absolutely phenomenal, both from the costing perspective, from the output perspective, and the society's usage. One of the challenges, or one of the biggest conversations in government has been sovereignty.
Yeah.
And for obvious reasons, that we can't, as a country, be beholden to foreign tech in a way that doesn't provide us with any. I think the term you used was leverage, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, the term I was using, referring to as leverage in the sense that if we're using foreign technology, we need to have a counterbalance to that.
Exactly.
And that's our leverage as to why if someone turns around to a later date and says, hey, we don't want you using that technology anymore because you're not our favorite friend anymore.
Yeah.
Then we need to turn around and say, well, if you take that away, we're going to take their toys away as well. In a more mature sense.
And as we've seen in the last couple of weeks.
Not always.
And a different story.
And as we've seen in the last couple of weeks with Trump saying, oh, no one else can have those Anthropic models. That's quite an extreme case, but the same could apply for other technology platforms that we're using currently within government that could and are owned by big US tech firms. I know that might not be something you can speak to, but where you're looking to roll out AI services across your constituency, who's getting to decide what that kind of utopia is for the future where technology is concerned? Is it society that gets to define it? Is it government? Is it the California tech bros? How would you like to see that play out?
Yeah, there's a lot there, isn't there? So first of all, I would say that in blueprinting how a city state or city region runs, the ambition isn't just for the UK. It's looking at how do we do this right and appropriately for other cities around the world.
Yeah.
We've got the opportunity to be able to look at how we do things in the UK. That isn't just applicable to other combined authorities that might have a CIO after us within the UK. It's to look at, just this week I was speaking to Hamburg, to Bratislava, to Madrid, to look at how other countries are using AI. And it's fair to say that we're all evolving at different stages and different paces, but that combined learning, I think, is absolutely critical. So that's, to one of the points. The second point in terms of sovereignty, yes, you're absolutely right. How do we start to build our own resources so that we're not reliant on other powers that may decide to remove, access to, certain parts of those modeling, but also to be able to make a better play in the UK economy. For that, but the tools that have evolved to where they are at the moment, and they happen to be the largest models that we have, and currently rely on are perhaps stateside, but we're trying to obviously encourage the ecosystem and infrastructure that we can part to grow our own capability. It was fantastic to hear from the Digital and Justice Minister from Estonia, who has a real strong sense of sovereignty to be able to say, actually, we might be slower in our development, but we really want to either keep models that are baked in from our own country or from European countries that have an understanding with Estonia as opposed to perhaps American big tech. And I thought that was a really interesting point of view. And that when she was asked whether it's difficult managing two portfolios, her answer was, they're not two, they're one. You can't have justice without digital, and you can't have digital without justice, and they're a real close marriage. So I thought that was an interesting point of view. But to the other part of your question, Greig, which is looking at actually who owns the utopia in terms of this and who should own it within that. It's it's an interesting play, isn't it? Because I don't believe that any digital services should be made without not just consulting, but co-development and co-creation of the people that they are for. And that's just good digital practice. I mean, our government digital service set out these rules a number of years ago, but that's just good digital design, isn't it? To have that co-collaboration.
Well, it helps with adoption.
It does help with adoption.
That's the key thing, is no point building something if people don't adopt it and don't use it.
But it's certainly in adoption, but it's also making sure that it's absolutely right. I mean, we've got a history of having products designed without the input of women, and therefore you got stabbed at vests that don't fit, like crash test dummies on male weight, medication on male weight. We should have learned from that product innovation to realize that we actually need to be more equitable and who we're co-evolving our digital opportunities for within that. But there's also a part, so lots of organizations talk about the triple helix, which is, government and businesses, together with universities. And we talk about the quadruple helix, which is also with civic society. So to have those kind of four elements in the way that you're evolving would benefit every part of that society that is for. I'm not saying it's done that way, but I'm saying that we try to move towards that way as much as we possibly can. That is the ideal.
But the economics that you talked about in a previous point that you made make some of those decisions challenging.
It does.
So I was going to say, there's a lot you said there. That was a big question that Greig asked. And I had a number of different follow-ups, but one of the ones which you talked just now about the four-stranded helix.
Yes.
And the civic engagement as being part of that. I mean, how does that happen? How do you make that work? How do you get that going?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. So Liverpool City Region, we've had the Civic Data Cooperative, which is an initiative between Liverpool City Region and the University of Liverpool that has actually put a residents' data and AI charter together of 11 principles of how residents want their data treated. And we bake that into things that we make within the city region. So that is it's been pointed to as a great example from central government in terms of how to do this well. So that is a clear example. But it's fair to say that as a combined authority, we fund a lot of opportunities to help economic growth within the region. And therefore, actually, we can't do this alone. We absolutely have to work with our local businesses and our universities, and involving citizens makes sense in terms of that. So it's then on a project by project basis. So it's not one company necessarily bidding for it. We bake that into the procurement. We're working with academia, with universities, with residents. You break that into the kind of procurement rules, and then people bidding for that particular funding need to demonstrate exactly how they're doing that. Is some of the work that we're doing.
Well, sorry. I'm just going to ask another question.
No, go on.
Because I was fascinated just now maybe this is because of my background, but when you talked about the data just now and the charter that you put forward and the residents involved in that, was there anything which came out of that where you turned around and went, oh, that's surprisingly something different, or something you hadn't anticipated in that charter that the residents actually came up with?
So, no, I'll be honest.
Okay.
And it was done before my tenure. It existed in the region before I came in, but it's a really good principle. But it's about accountability and transparency and, making sure that, you are, ensuring that you're clear about the models you're using, when they were last trained, what they were trained on. It was using data, not you must have all experienced, the list as long as your arm when you're asking for Wi-Fi, and how inappropriate it is to ask data for something quite simple. So just use data where it's appropriate in terms of that. And so there wasn't anything necessarily surprising that came out of it. The 11 principles kind of stand up, but that's what makes them so great, because they're very easy to be transportable to, they're not pertinent necessarily to our region. They're very transportable in terms of what good, fair data access should look like.
And you're saying you're talking about the region just now. One of the things you said earlier was in terms of the conference you were at recently, when you were talking to from different regions from around the world. Is there any learning which you've turned around and gone, they're doing it brilliantly over there? I know you mentioned Estonia just now.
Yes.
Any other locations we go, that's actually a really good nugget of which we can take, and we can use that and leverage it over here?
Well, I think it's absolutely incredible. It's super fast learning just this week. So we had the huge pleasure to hear from the team in Madrid. And Madrid went through a blackout in Spain.
Yes, they did last year.
And actually then looking at resilience for our cities and being able to share that with us was learning that other cities who have not had a blackout necessarily knew the patients in the hospitals that needed electricity and needed to be kept alive, needed to know where the diesel trucks were, how full they were, how they could get around the city. The engineering of understanding that is now so solid in Spain because they've had the blackout. So until you've had a significant event that forces you to really look at your programming, you perhaps that isn't in place in every city. So that's why it's really important to learn from other cities, because they've had other events that we can all learn from, that we can apply and get ourselves ready.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were talking about how we're producing now in the UK more energy than we need because we're not manufacturing anymore. We've just got no way of storing it. And I can't remember if Madrid was an energy shortage issue or an attack on like a CN. I can't remember. But
it was not an attack.
I didn't realise we produce more energy anyway. I thought it was, we talk
apparently
about...
we do, because there's no manufacturing going on. We've got nowhere to store it. So it just gets lost. But the thought that made me get to that point was that is now going to be like a top concern for cities around the world as AI is using more energy.
Yes.
Right? And then it made me remember this podcast, and it was like, okay, we're actually producing more than we need. Weird, right?
Well, this is fascinating. So we've got Dublin, who 25% of their energy is spent on data centers, and they've got a moratorium on not building more data centers.
25% of their energy is on data centers. Well, that's because you've got Meta there, you've got Google there.
Yeah, the gateway to Europe,
you've
right?
Got Equinix there.
Yeah, exactly. So but they're not allowed to build anymore in terms of that. Then you've got countries, Bhutan, I had the great pleasure to work with, who produce so much energy from hydroelectric power that they sell it back to India, and they have Bitcoin miners moving there. Because actually energy is free for citizens and, to some degree, businesses there.
Let's not give anybody any ideas. Bitcoin miners. I want to go back.
Is this your new profession you're going to take up? Bitcoin mining?
No, absolutely not.
I've got a meme of you with a little helmet and a pickaxe.
That's Minecraft. That's something different.
I think.
Oh, yes, could be too much time with the kids. So
that's going to send us down a rabbit hole to talk about the future of crypto. The future of money. We're not far off how that could.
Let's go down the rabbit hole. I can see your face.
No, because that takes us into a whole different conversation. Because there's so much in that. But when we talk about the procurement thing,
yes,
that's really a springboard to kind of like a bigger question. Now, having worked with government, having gone through procurement process myself, having gone through tender processes, I'm kind of very familiar with who wins the projects. And they win the projects because they've got the examples, they've got the case studies, they've got not the relationships per se, but they've got those pre-existing business relationships in place, not necessarily personal ones. So when we are talking about building for a future AI-enabled societal utopia, how will we ensure we're designing it around the priorities of the most needy rather than the priorities of those who have the power, who are the incumbents? Because you talked in quite and take no offense, in an idealistic sense around it's the best idea that wins, when actually that's not always the case with government, because they're not necessarily the ones that win the procurement. If you're an SME in the UK and trying to get a contract and have the best product and have the best solution, you don't get a look in. And as much as Keir Starmer bangs on about a new mandate for government working with SMEs and making the procurement process more agile, it just hasn't happened. So from your perspective, in a practical sense, how do we ensure that the best models, the best technology is being surfaced to provide society with the best possible outcome?
Yeah. I'm delighted you asked this, because I've
really okay, good. I thought that would unnecessarily put you on the spot a little bit.
No, well, it does, but it's a brilliant question, because I'm not sure I alluded to the best idea wins. I just explained the process that actually of the quadruple helix is something that we're building in to procurement in Liverpool. There was a brilliant debate this week about procurement. And even the organisers of the event suggested that putting procurement on the agenda was a little bit edgy, and it fired the most amount of debate from other city heads in terms of AI and opportunities. So there's a couple of things that I learned this week, but also some approaches that I think really work, which is procurement is ripe for change. We all know that, and particularly local, central, regional government procurement is absolutely ripe for change. And the way in which that AI is manifest, we need to have the ability to work with small providers that are doing something achingly new that perhaps aren't the general organizations that we've been working with. And there needs to be that facility. And they might not have the test cases, and they might not have the 3 years of, working history that generally is baked into procurement. So every local authority, every combined authority, central government need to look at their procurement practices to be able to ensure that they can work with the best emerging talent in the way in which that they can. So some of the discussion this week that I absolutely uphold, and I'm going to be able to take back to the combined authority as well, is to be able to look at one of the solutions was, can we have a conglomerate of small businesses actually that sit within a special use case that might be emerging in terms of their technology, and ensure that we understand what they're doing and to be able to work with them within that regard. And I thought that was interesting. Conglomerate is my word. I'm sure there's a smarter word for that kind of,
cooperative.
A cooperative, of small businesses. So that was one idea thrown around.
I understand.
The other one was that we've been very fixed in terms of, design, deliver, deploy, and actually you have to kind of experiment a lot more. So actually the stages that we're asking for people and organizations that we've currently procured against need to change. And actually we don't know what might come out of it within that. So the way that I am personally approaching this in Liverpool City Region is to build an AI testbed. And it's a system and a process, not a physical digital system yet, whereby we work out our sticky problems in healthcare and social care and education and in transport. And then we have a framework, a way of working with our businesses and our universities, the compute power from STFC Hartree. We've got 1 megawatt computer within the region, with the companies that are making, really good products and services and moving, towards more effective ways of working. And then to do the rapid prototyping. And it might be that there's one sticky problem and there's 3 or 4 either businesses or conglomerates of businesses working with universities to be able to solve that. And we pick two out of the 3 or 4, knowing that in the rapid prototyping, not all of those are scalable, but might spark other ideas. So we're changing the way in which that we procure because it needs to be fit for a new era.
I applaud you for that. I've worked with UKRI or Innovate UK.
Yeah.
The grant system is rubbish. UKRI, you talked about building an ecosystem of innovative AI companies. We do not have a system in place at the moment to support that. Innovate UK, UKRI, they try, but I just don't think it has the backing from government. I mean, there was some money invested. It was quite a small amount. And I was over with a company that got some of that funding the other day. They found it so difficult to start working with government or to start supporting using their technology. And I just think the process that you're suggesting would be game-changing, phenomenal. And that whole kind of mission from government, the current government at the moment, or the current party, to say that we would be leaders in AI globally, what you're suggesting would help get us there. It's a whole systemic change in how we work with businesses, because at the moment we make it so hard for them that the only ones that can are your sort of big beasts, of which I won't name. But I'm glad that there's been some work done with, I won't name them, but a big US, I don't mean they are a big US semiconductor firm, no, GPU company, and that they have a sort of ideological mandate internally to help and nurture those startups. So I'm kind of glad that's been done, albeit it's a big US tech company, but they are the sort of leaders in the world, and leveraging their Inception program does allow for you to have access to some of the best tech in the world. And that's homegrown. So process change, great. Partnerships, great. Nurturing that, what you call conglomerate or cooperative of small startups with universities, with society and then with companies, absolutely perfect. I applaud you for wanting to make that change, because it has been so difficult to date that it caused me to actually sell up and get out.
Well, I think what I've witnessed and what drew me towards it is that the combined authority, we don't necessarily have the resources to make brilliant digital changes right across the region. My focus is 80% in the region. We've got a brilliant head of digital services and we all mainly work on one kind of operating system, as many public sectors, choose one of those kind of providers that is interoperable between public sector. And therefore, there's brilliant opportunities to make, we've got an internal data and AI academy that is making products and services that internally that make us better and smarter as a combined authority and across our 6 local authorities. And my remit is looking out more at the region in terms of what we can do and deliver that is off stack, off prem, in sandboxes, and working in different environments with more experimental opportunities. And therefore, we've had a history of commissioning because we haven't had the, we've got 10 developers and they're all focused on our internal stack and what we can do to be able to create better, efficiency and productivity. Whereas actually, and better outcomes. It's not just many businesses are focused on productivity and operational efficiency, and we also look at how can we get to outcomes faster as a public sector body. But essentially, this process of giving packets of money to smaller businesses, larger businesses even, to be able to have a commission to do something over 1 year or 3 years means anecdotally that we have more pilots than British Airways. And we want to be able to have baked in the scale up as well as just, the piloting of it. And therefore, only by building our own, through the collaboration with other brilliant partners, working on our exact issues is the way that we're really going to be able to grow as a region.
I mean, one of the things which,
excuse me,
in my mind, you have a sip of water. So in my mind, one of the things when you were talking just now, I was listening away, and there's a question I had right at the beginning, which is when you said procurement's ripe for change, why is it ripe for change? And the other follow-up question, which is related to it, is part of what you're doing, is that just more acceptance of risk and also failure? Because quite often we turn around and go, okay, we can't have this fail. We can't have this business fail. We can't do that. Actually, unless we let people play, test, trial, fail, we won't actually innovate, because we always stay within the safety lane and nothing ever changes. So is it part of what you're doing there is allowing people to test things and therefore take a risk? And they also fail as well.
Brilliant point of view. So I think we covered enough in terms of what procurement might need to change, which is essentially it was designed for a system where you could define the outputs, and we're now, some of the things that we will discover along the route to building something within that. Super interestingly, there's 2 biggest issues within public sector, more perhaps than private sector, trust and risk. So in the private sector, you have the opportunity to pay people more or be more deterministic around incentivizing them commercially. And in the public sector, we can't do that with our people. So how do we incentivize people to take risk within that? So this is something that I'm so fascinated by, that it's something I study outside of my role. And something that I focused very recently on in terms of looking at leadership psychology. So we had there was a event I was at 2 weeks ago, and we had another public sector regional head who said we need to enable our people to take more risk, and we do. But to be able to do that, the conditions to enable people to make more risk and to take more risk and to have better degrees of innovation internally in a larger structure is there was a study by Google in 2012 called Project Aristotle. And there's 10,000 academic papers on the web about it. And they came out with maybe 5 different things, but the top one was psychological safety. And then 2 years later, that was disproved, but it was a smaller study, and second studies don't always get the prevalence that they should. And it said that high-performing teams absolutely need psychological safety to be able to flourish, but sometimes they tank unless they've got one other thing. And that other thing is constructive dissent. So the ability for individuals to say, I'm wrong, you're wrong, leader, you're wrong. And actually there's a better way of doing it, but constructive as in a principled rebel for the benefit of the company. And actually to do that, you need to create better conditions for employee voice, to enable people who are closest to the action, to be able to spot the changes that need to happen and to be able to be taken seriously and to be able to have an impact on the work that they're doing and delivering, and their ideas manifest, or even told why those ideas are not manifest, to be able to do it. And I think that we have to, is a cultural change that needs to happen alongside AI, because things are moving much faster and we need to help people innovate and to create the conditions for innovation.
I think sandboxing does help with some of that. But,
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. We talk about private sectors less risk averse. They're happy. Well, they do make mistakes. The government makes horrendous mistakes, and they make it on such an incredible scale that it causes so much harm and damage. And is it because of the fear up front, the psychological fear up front of not making a mistake, that unfortunately mistakes happen?
So large businesses also make large mistakes. It's not just government, but of course government are more in the public eye because it's the public paying that spend. So private sector and public sector make huge mistakes. And I can't really comment on what mistakes you're talking about or generalizing to say that it's because of a risk or a fear factor. But what I think is interesting in the point that you said that innovating and sandboxing will help. So it was really encouraging to hear from DSIT this week, so the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, to say that they're sitting down machine engineers with every permanent secretary across government to get their hands dirty and to make an app in an afternoon, because it's the experiential opportunity that really helps people with the activation, which I thought was fascinating. Now, just another point on that, if I may, which is Bloom's taxonomy of change is the model for learning. And there's 5 levels, and, you might have activation up at level 3, for example. I can't recall them in order.
There will be a test later.
There will be a test later. I should know this. I've just finished my MSc in this. But essentially, the point of view from DSIT this week was that model's been changed on its head, and activation is first. And I thought that's a really interesting premise. So we've always been taught to understand something, in a leveled approach, and playing and activation and understanding something and just getting stuck in is really kind of 101. And I thought that was not only was a really interesting point of view, but the fact that they're doing that at such a senior level in central government was really encouraging.
Well, I think if I take it from a private sector perspective, that's one of the things we do is when we talk about transformation is actually get the senior leadership to be on board first and actually get them playing with this stuff so they can go, and they do, you see these aha moments where they just go, right, that's the art of the possible. They may not, of course they've got a different day job, but if they can understand what could be achieved and how the sort of process works, it's absolutely amazing. And it is really, and then it helps the rest of the organization on their journey to see the leadership do that. So yeah, it is, that's very cool, which does actually, and what you said just now has kept on resonating with me, because a couple of weeks ago, we had a fantastic conversation with a lady called Carla Ertz. And one of the things she turned around, this was on the future of education and the impact of AI and whether there's time to, does it give us the opportunity to rethink what education is actually for? And one of the things she said is that we should take teachers and children and they should have a sandbox which they can play in the classroom, where they just get in a safe space.
Yeah.
But the teachers and the kids learn together, and it's co-creation and collaborating. No agenda apart from just playing, and I'm trying to understand how they can use this technology.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. One of the things that we want to do, which is part of our agenda, is citizen science experiments. So, yes, there's ways of teaching children. They must know maths and English and, there's science, and there's tooling that we put in 10% of primary schools in just year 6 to be able to help that kind of critical end of primary into secondary school to help kids who are 10 months behind their peers be able to, reach that level of attainment. And we can fund things in perpetuity. But one of the things we're quite excited about understanding is, can we give technology to teachers and students to measure their air quality in their local local, not region, but even like their local area. And by playing with that technology and understanding what it does, gives you a different level of opportunity. So it's one of the things that we're looking at. Citizen science experiment.
That sounds a bit dark to me. It sounds a bit dark.
What, open data, transparently understanding how pollution might affect their own environment.
I don't know. It's
dark?
just the term of putting citizens and science experiments in the same mix.
Where did your mind go?
Connotes something. I don't know.
As a philosopher.
It's not in if it's helpful.
So we're not going to do any science experiments with you then?
I'd rather you didn't, because it makes me sound like you're going to open my brain herein. I'd rather you definitely didn't do that. But where we talk about all the exciting things that are going to happen, all the exciting things we're working on, but how do we mitigate the risks of that?
Yes, it's a biggie, isn't it, in terms of that? What can we do to mitigate risks?
For instance, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We talk about citizen science experiments, and how do we make sure that all voices of society are represented, that those who might potentially be the most vulnerable in society are getting the most access to use AI where it can help them?
Yes. So there's been digital literacy programs for a very long time in, all parts of the UK. Knowledge, Good Things Foundation, and Helen Milner, who very recently was the startup founder and CEO, looked at running these types of programs in terms of digital literacy. And then we've got AI literacy, So if digital literacy was helping people understand ways to stop phishing, keep them safe online, and know that there's better deals online and be able to interact online is one piece. And then AI powers that at scale. So how do you understand that LLMs make things up and don't give you all of those answers, right? So there's a bit of 101 in AI literacy. But really interesting, I was chatting to the head of education for Google, and he's like, well, that's all very well, but people need the devices. And there are people who just, haven't got access to devices. So there's broadband, isn't there? There's connectivity, and we're, blessed with being able to have LCR Connect in our region, 500 kilometers, like high fiber, to be able to help provide this with businesses and residents, but not everyone does. And when you're talking about everyone, like I'm looking at it from our city region area, but there's differentiation in geography. There's difference in economics, people being able to have the right access. And then there's difference in terms of cultures. I mean, Nigel and I were having a brilliant kind of conversation about looking at there's different models around the world that operate differently from China to the US and in how they're set up to do and deliver. So it's fair to say that access to AI is not equitable at the moment. And what we can start to do within our area about that, and that is, of course, giving devices. We give 4,000 devices to, parents to be able to help their kids with their homeworks at school that are given by a kind of program. We help to look at what are the free resources that are available online to help educate people. Within that, we look at actually trying to mitigate the digital divide and knowing that an AI divide might amplify that if you think about the people who are first served by AI, they're people who are technologically astute, got access to the great devices, got access to models, can perhaps pay for the paid version of things, people working and in work. And they are therefore the group of people that might accelerate their learning, and that might create that kind of digital divide. So we're looking at what are the things that we can do to be able to mitigate that in some of the ways that I've shared.
I mean, that digital divide it's a big topic. You talked, if we think about, there's people out there who can adopt it first, but also which are the most vulnerable groups which we may need to actually think about to actually make sure that we're lifting them up as well and we're not leaving them behind in this divide?
Well, there's people who don't even access the web, right? And they might be from perhaps older generations.
I wonder if they're happy.
Right? Yeah.
That's a really good point.
But there's also people who don't want to, who want to limit their interaction, who want to have a smaller digital footprint. And it's harder and harder to now with the way in which that we interact with our government and our services is more digital. Yeah. But there is a right to not, right to be forgotten, right to not necessarily access this as well. Yeah. So we have to be mindful that in everything that we're doing to be able to help people is also to be able to ensure that we are understanding, people's requirements and needs, and a way of which allowing people to have that right to interact or not right to interact is super pertinent as well. So there is not just necessarily older people. I mean, that's certainly a cohort that potentially need more help, that have not gone through this at every stage of their working lives like potentially we have. But I mentioned it a little bit earlier, as different cultures around the world, different people have access to broadband, different the people that are left behind are people who are more economically vulnerable.
It is a big challenge, and I don't envy anyone who's trying to take on and resolve that challenge. It's a big one. One of the things which also came to mind when you were talking about it just now is also talking about looking at how do we make sure those groups as well who may have a different language.
Yes.
And how do we keep their culture alive and their language alive? And if you look around the UK, there's so many different languages spoken, making sure those aren't lost in the digital divide too.
Well, I do think that AI can actually potentially help with that because of its real-time translation capabilities, So the language barrier, if you like, is the fact that most of the LLMs are in English. I mean, yes. Germany have got a brilliant one, so France, we haven't necessarily got our own yet, but there are a lot of the tools. But actually,
just trying to think, what the English ones speak? Would it be sort of, would we have a Cockney version? Would we have a...
Jamaican now. Jamaican's the most spoken language in the South East.
I used to live in Singapore and they had a language called Singlish.
Right.
Which was a kind of it was a different language. But, I was trying to think what the English version would be, or, even like Welsh. How do we make sure we enable Welsh language and keep that alive and that culture alive?
Well, I mean, part of that is, the speaking and the teaching within schools, but that real-time translation piece is really fascinating, and being able to, I used to work in central government when we had a duty of care for every part of our kind of, mandate of literature to be translated into Welsh, and that involved at the time translation companies and back translation to make sure that we got that right. And now we've got digital avatars that are wayfinders and can point to how you transport yourself around the city or what beyond, and they operate in 99 languages. We've got one in Southport Station, and we've got it on the web. To be able to communicate that is a fantastic opportunity. But how you keep languages alive is it can be AI enabled to some degree. We've seen the great rise of apps, haven't we, that can teach us all in our micro learning to be able to speak in a variety of different languages now. So we don't necessarily have to be just taught them in schools, of course.
I'm very grateful for that because I studied French for many, many years. And I failed abysmally in my learning. So,
and now you've got Duolingo, you're fluent.
Well, now you can actually use the headphones on your Apple. Can actually supposed to do real time. I've never tried it, so don't I was going to use it as an advice from me. But you can use real time translation.
Oh, yes,
on your Apple headphones apparently. And if someone else has got the same headphones or have got Apple headphones as well, apparently you can literally have a conversation.
I was going to ask you to tell us some French.
Bonjour. Anyway, let's move on. Go on.
So how do we ensure that all of this is done equitably and that AI is rolled out across, let's say, your region, for example, in a way that sort of benefits everybody and is shared widely? Do we need to reconsider the economic model? Do we need to kind of state control over the platforms that are being used? How do we ensure that it's shared as widely as possible and that everyone has access to it?
Yeah. So one of the programs of activity we're doing is helping train head teachers into the strategic use of AI so that they can make the decisions that are right for them in their school and the classroom. But of course, that affects our future generation of our future workforce for the children that are enabled learning. So there are personalized learning within that. So and we want to be able to, and we've got a program of activity this year where we're looking at training every single head teacher within our region to be able to look at the strategic use of AI. So there's a couple of different points to this, isn't there? So you've got to look at actually future talent, and the way in which that they can use and operate it. You've got to look at, current residents. So we've got a digital inclusion team that, give out devices and then do the 101 of some of the basic kind of AI safety education within that. You've got to nurture small businesses, as well as ensure that you're providing economic pathways to the larger businesses. We've attracted to the region in the last year and before my tenure, a great partner for the region, Kyndryl, who's promised 1,000 jobs in AI over the next 3 years.
Very well. Yeah.
So, and actually, we've got therefore then a way of working with them that benefits the region. They give out apprenticeships. They come in. They take our businesses through their labs. They work with our skills team to understand children education, and that is such a model that the flagship. Office for them within the UK, that they've had the Luxembourg minister going, can we have this model in Luxembourg, right? Because we need to understand how large businesses are actually serving the region. So it's not just all about small businesses within that. And then within small businesses, it's what can we do to enable literacy? Is there something that, or confidence, we like to call it, right? AI confidence more than anything else. So one of the things that we will be looking at is how can we bear on our local businesses or national partnerships to be able to help that kind of AI education piece, to be able to help upskill them within the work that they do and deliver, to help them grow. And then, taking them out overseas. So we recently had an MOU with ARIC in Hamburg, which are the Artificial Intelligence Center there, took 10 of our AI businesses to Hamburg to have this interactive inward investment pool, if you like, and one of them won a contract while they were just out there, right? And just a couple of months ago. So there's when you're saying, how do you do this? You do it through schools, right? You do it through the provision for people. You do it for small businesses. You do it for large businesses. We're also working to look at what is the skills needs in our region 3 to 5 years out, so that we can start to thin slice that into the educational establishments, both at university and a sixth form college level, for future career pathways. So we're trying to buoy up that talent line as much as we possibly can. It'll change the funding model, perhaps from universities, because they're used to doing big university courses, and actually, but also that will help them with their, future income streams as well, as we know that they're getting pressure to be able to change. And knowing that AI will come and change jobs, we're trying to buoy up the region in terms of what do we need as a region, not just in tech jobs, in every kind of job, and trying to provide for that. So I think it's a holistic approach. It's not, one thing. We're doing it in schools and residents and businesses, large and small, and now universities as well, and talent pipelines. So, I need a bigger team, really.
Think
you do, and don't forget your budget as well. A bigger budget too.
I've got a lot of confidence in that as a framework, as long as when you talk about the curriculum changing to meet the needs of 3 to 5 years down the line, those courses aren't then being sponsored by big tech companies. Because then I think there becomes a mismatch between what we're teaching people and the influence of corporates on education, which I don't know how I feel about that. I think part of me feels like that's a bit of church and state being mixed there. Or
it depends what the evidence base. So if the evidence of our research says that these are the jobs that we need, then we have to look at who can provide that education. And as long as we are rigorous in the educational output from that, yes, we need to be cautious about the providers to make sure that it's not unfair in its sponsorship. And I'm not saying any of this will be necessarily, delivered by big tech, but it's actually about understanding the evidence base of the educational needs and then understand the partnerships that can deliver and keeping them with an academic rigor.
Yeah.
Is really key.
There's also the element of societal needs, because again, let's not lose sight of who this is all for. It's all for the residents. It's all for the people. So actually, this is what it's all about. So one of the things which is you didn't mention earlier, but I'm going to bang the drum for, is for early years education. And the reason why I say that is from a technology and standpoint, if you can build that fluency natively in them from a very young age, as they mature and go through their education, you're not having to retrofit it at a later date. They are naturally aware, more prepared, and therefore gives them more opportunity. So yeah, I'd say early years, if you can fit that into your portfolio too, to help influence and make sure that those children are getting that basic understanding of what tech
I need
is all
an early
about.
years budget too now.
Yes.
Yeah, not just TikTok scrolling, but actually having some idea of how it can benefit.
Because it's just wonderful. Because if you think about it, because often I distinguish between skills and fluency, and skills is knowing how to do something and knowing which prompts to use, how to do it, how to write it, et cetera, et cetera. Fluency is knowing when to use it. And if we can get that embedded into youth from as early as possible, it stands them in the greatest stead for actually being successful down the track.
It's a really good challenge, and I will take that back to the team. I have myself and 2 project managers in my team, one of which is wholly focused on AI and education, that only joined us in January. So he'll be delighted with this additional agenda that I'll bring back to him.
Right, the team are nudging that we've got final 5 minutes. So final question, and then we'll need to wrap up.
Final question. Am I allowed to ask a proper question?
No, please go.
So, I mean, you've already talked about it, but one of the things I'd love to do is, are there any specific actions you'd like to say to businesses they should be doing to help them on this journey? And some key takeaways you say to them, come on, businesses, do this.
It's really important that businesses do consider allowing their people to have access to tools, to allow experimentation, and to really not cut the lowest paid administration jobs that feed their future talent pipeline, but and to enable that critical thinking, because if you are, as we've seen with larger organizations, perhaps reducing the number of graduate roles or administration roles, like who is going to be the junior paralegal in 3 to 5 years' time? Who is going to then discern whether the AI output is right within that? So I would strongly encourage businesses to keep growing the workforce in the regard that they deploy them differently. Email didn't really cut our workload, did it? Let's face it. So there is plenty of opportunity for AI certainly to do more administrative tasks, but to free up people to be really creatively solving the problems that businesses need to be able to do and deliver.
That's brilliant.
You're not going to ask your one that you put in, huh?
Oh, okay. Well, you told me that I was only allowed one question. So,
we let him. He'll go on forever.
Oh, come on. You love a rabbit hole.
I'm cutting some of this stuff out. So don't worry. We'll cut some of this stuff out.
Okay. So one final sort of slightly cheeky question. Elon Musk has long argued that both argue the case for AI and also for colonizing other planets. If you had a choice between AI paradise delivered on planet Earth or paradise attempted on Mars, which would you choose and why?
Earth. I'm a sailor.
A sailor?
I need the oceans.
I get it.
But I mean, that's a curt answer if you look at that. If you look at it more than that, we haven't solved half the problems on Earth, right? We haven't solved relations between international relations, governance, big tech. Like changing that to Mars is just changing the address, right?
Yes.
We shouldn't have a cop out of necessarily, actually, let's go and colonize another planet. Let's try and fix Earth, right? But also, this isn't to denigrate against space travel. I think that exploration is really, really important. But there are some things that we should be solving here as well.
We've got a brilliant episode on space.
We do have a great
and it talks to exactly some of the points you just said.
And in fact, prior to doing that episode, I was very sort of nonchalant about space. And then we did the episode and found all the benefits of going to the moon and data centers in space and helium-3 that could power, what was it? I can't remember the fuelless.
I don't know. Anyway,
Clean energy. That's the word I'm looking for.
Clean energy.
Power clean energy on Earth forever. So we wouldn't need petrochemicals or anything like that. So thank you for joining us. And thank you guys for joining us. And if you like what you heard, please like, share and subscribe for more and visit Behind the Algo for all of our episodes. And thanks to the production team, Laura Marcos da Silva, Jonathan DeMelkin, CC Fan and Ola Oosh. Thank you guys. We've been Behind the Algorithm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
there we go. Excellent.